I was since Sunday, I was kind of praying about the direction to go, and there were some things on my mind, and kind of going back and forth between the Lord, trying to see what He would be pleased with. And we had a wonderful, honestly, we had a wonderful service on Sunday. We had some beautiful testimonies. Enjoyed everybody that got up and gave thanks to the Lord. Had a wonderful worship. And there was something that eventually landed on my heart that I couldn't shake. And then, the Lord began to confirm for me that's kind of the direction that He would be pleased that we go in. And and did you know that we just finished talking about the baptisms, and we finished Sunday talking about the baptism of fire. And if one is not careful in this walk with the Lord, you can almost take a stance of doom and gloom in following the Lord. And what I mean by that is the Bible talks a lot about suffering, about bearing and forbearing and long suffering and patience. And I say this very cautiously with respect to the Lord, is that if we're not careful, we can almost get um, discouraged. We can almost get saddened and frustrated if we only talk about that baptism of fire, like we talked about on Sunday, that process of being purified. We can almost get weary. I think one place Paul began to write to a church and says, um, he said, "You will reap if you faint not." And he said, "Be not weary." There it is. "In well doing, for you shall reap if you faint not." And if the Lord would be pleased, it was pressed upon my heart to look at some of the scriptures and verses and the history of Jesus as far as Him delivering His people from obstacles. Sometimes this life, if we're honest, I'm gonna try to have not try to because I'm honest with you all. But if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes life can get trying. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of things in this life that we have no control over. There are circumstances that we find ourselves in. And because you're a follower of Christ, that doesn't necessarily mean that those things are going to go away, that those things are going to be altogether eliminated. They were going to happen whether you follow Christ or you didn't. But in following Christ, we have committed and we have consecrated ourselves, and we entered a covenant with the Lord saying, "Lord, I'm willing to go through this life the way you did so that ultimately I can end up where you are." But we're fallible creatures. I think one place He told Adam, He said, "Dust thou art and dust you are returned." The Lord remembers. One place, I think one writer talks about, He remembers that our frame is but dust. He knows where He made us from. He knows where we come from. And sometimes we need encouragement. Sometimes we need a reminder that He is who He says He is. And I think we talked about this maybe a few months ago, but much like the Ark of the Covenant, sometimes you have to be reminded, no, I am who I said I am, and I will do what I said I would do. And there are, I don't want to say benefits because I don't want it to look like a quid pro quo relationship with the Lord. Like, well, if I do this for you, you do this for me. But he does look out and He does cover His people. And sometimes what gets us is the time frame, right? Because our lives are we have a finite amount of time, and Jesus and His Father, they live in eternity. Sometimes we can get a little discouraged by time periods. But time and time again, I think one place the Bible talks about the testimony of Jesus, or the testimony of Christ, is the spirit of prophecy. Well, what does that mean? That means that the testimony that He's done one thing or that He's delivered is the spirit of prophecy, meaning, man, if He's done it before, He can do it again. That's why testimonies are so important. That's why when we get together and we begin to share the things that the Lord has done for us, those are so important, because what does it do? It encourages somebody else that's going through the same thing, and it lets them know, or it gives them some strength to say, well, if He did it for Aaron, if I get up and I begin to tell my testimony, my eyes might water a little bit. I apologize. But if I get up and I begin to tell my testimony, And I begin to tell you the things that the Lord has delivered me from and he's covered me from. And the times when I was on my knees, they call them the prayer bones, and he heard me, then what does that do? That encourages you. And he said, oh man, if he did it for Aaron, I know he can do it for me. I just got to wait my turn. I got to wait till the Lord deems it necessary for him to come for me. So if the Lord be pleased, I just want to encourage you a little bit, because I know sometimes in this life, you can begin to go through things and it can be a heavy burden. I'm not going through anything. I'm not that heavy. That's not why I'm crying. I do that because I love the Lord and I love you all, and I want you to be encouraged in him. I want you to understand that he hears you when you pray and he hears you when you cry out. I think one place the Bible talks about it says his ears are open. His ears are open to the righteous, and his oh man, that's in Isaiah. I can't get it exactly, but it says your walls are ever before me, and I've engraven you upon the palms of my hand. I want you to know that regardless of how bleak the situation looks, he has a pattern. He has a reputation of coming for his people. So, I don't want you to just think that, oh man, he just saying things. Let's look at the word of God, because listen, when you look at this, don't just look at this like a phone book. I heard that analogy one time. He said, if you just read this like the phone book, right? David Johnson, 376-172897. Fred Johnson, and you're not going to get anything. But if you begin to read it like true accounts, like testimony of people that lived and breathed, much like you and I, you will begin to get encouraged because you would say, oh my God, from the beginning of time, he's been delivering his people. He's been covering them. He's been helping them. He's been a standard bearer for them and rose up when they needed him the most. See, here's the thing. Sometimes we think we need him to show up, and he's like, you're fine. It might be difficult. It might hurt a little bit, but I've got you. I'm carrying you. And if we would just understand that, then we will be surprised at what we can get through. All right, look at what he says here. Let's start in Exodus, but I'm gonna read a verse here in Genesis, the 15th chapter and the 13th verse. Now here in Genesis 15, God is talking to Abraham, and he's giving Abraham a prophecy. Remember, the nation of Israel came out of the lineage of Abraham, and God is telling Abraham something that's going to happen to his lineage, and it's going to happen centuries down. But understand that this is what God had already determined that this was going to happen. Look what he says here, Genesis 15 and 13. And he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with a great substance. All right, turn to Exodus, the first chapter. So here, God is already telling Abraham, say, listen, your people, your lineage is going to be in a bad situation. Can you imagine? No fault of their own, and God is still righteous. But just if you just happen to be born in a certain time, just know you're gonna be a slave in Israel. A slave in Egypt, and you ain't had nothing to do with it. And you might not live long enough to see the deliverance, but on God's timeline, there was a deliverance that came for the nation of Israel. Look at what he says here. Exodus, the first chapter, start at the 8th verse. And look at how Egypt began to deal with the nation of Israel. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Now, if you were familiar with the history, you go back to Genesis. Joseph had been sold by. That's another situation that there's so many situations. I'm gonna see what the Lord allows me to get through, but that's another situation where, through no fault of his own, Joseph was sold into slavery. People lied on him, went to prison because he had a dream that God dealt with him, and then eventually the Lord elevated him, and he was second only to Pharaoh, and he began to cause the nation of Israel to have favor in the land of Egypt. But look what he says here, 8th verse. So there was a king that didn't know Joseph, didn't know what he had done, didn't know the saving that he did for the nation of Egypt during that feast, that famine that came. 9th verse. And he said unto his people, behold, the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. And therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithmoth and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. That means hardship. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage. Look at this. It says that, and this was already determined that it was going to happen by the Lord. But here, Egypt is making their lives bitter with hard bondage. They making their life terrible. I could see them coming home after building cities and like, man, I can't stand them Egyptians. They always messing with me, always hitting me with the whip, always telling me I'm not working hard enough. Oh, man, when is God coming? Look at what they said. Hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So here we have the nation of Israel in a situation where God had already determined that they would be in. And it's for 400 years. Now imagine being a young person, growing up through that whole thing, praying, asking, like looking at your parents. It's like, we're supposed to be the chosen of God. What is going on? I'm tired of getting whipped. I'm tired of having to carry these stones to build these tabernacles, to build these temples and this pyramid. I'm tired of this, Mom. When is God coming? And all I can hear is their parents said, have faith in God. Just keep believing. Don't lose your faith. Have faith in God. Let me show you. But let me show you what happened. God had already foretold that they would go through this, but let me show you something. Let me show you that when you pray, when you cry out, it might not come in the time period, but have confidence. Have faith that he hears your prayers. Look at what he says. Turn to Exodus. Look at the third chapter. Now here we are, by all accounts, some 400 years later, because they were supposed to be in bondage for 400 years. And here we have Moses. If you're familiar with the history of Moses, I'm not gonna go into it too much because I don't want to get sidetracked, because I could talk a lot about Moses. But Moses was a proper child, grew up in the temple of Pharaoh, saw somebody doing his brethren wrong or doing the Israelites wrong, slew him, and then tried to talk to his brother and be like, hey, why are y'all fighting one another? He's like, you gonna slay me like you did the Egyptian? And then Moses was like, oh man, it's hot here. They must know that I slew this Egyptian, so I need to get out of Dodge. I need to go somewhere. So Moses is out in the wilderness. He's married, and he comes to this burning bush. Now Moses is a great man, great servant of God. That's stipulated. That's submitted. There's no argument in that. But I want you to see why God called him. What was the purpose? Because remember, we're talking about God. He is still a deliverer. He's still who he says he is, and he has a pattern of it. Now, for 400 years, Israel is crying. They pray, and it's like, when we supposed to be them. We supposed to be God's only begotten. We are the children. We are his offspring. When is he coming? Look at what he says. Third chapter. And Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even unto Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. All right, so what is Moses doing? Moses is minding his own business. He out there tending the lamb or the sheep. And if you ever seen a fire, you will see a fire. If something is on fire, if it catches fire or it's engulfed, you can see it begins to deteriorate. Like if it's a tree or a leaf, it'll begin to turn to ash and it begin to crumble. But here Moses he's seeing this fire, and there's nothing, it's not consuming anything. So Moses, in his curiosity, it says he turned aside to consider it. And that's when, for some people, Moses be like, well, that's where Moses messed up. He turned to it, and all of a sudden the Lord began to speak to him. Look what it says. Third verse. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses.
And he said, here am I. And he said, draw not nigh hither. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place wherein thy standeth is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of the Father, thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he's afraid to look upon God. All right, listen. This is if there was ever a better intro to anybody, this is it. Now, mind you, Israel had been suffering for 400 years. And here Moses is, and God is making this intro, and he's like, man, and I'm adding this a little bit just so you can put this in perspective. God is that, I heard what's going on. I see what's happening to my people, but let me let you know who I am a little bit. He said, moreover, I am the God of thy father. Don't understand who I am that's about to talk to you. I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. That's who I am. So heed what I'm about to tell you. You know, the Lord can say the same thing in your life today. You can be going through a situation. You could be going through hard trials. You could be like, man, Lord, when I'm gonna get a car that's gonna work right? I'm just trying to take care of my obligations. When I'm gonna get a good housing situation, Lord, when I'm gonna get alleviated from this health situation, Lord, when am I going? I don't need to be abundant, but when am I gonna not live from check to check every month? Lord, when is my job situation is gonna be right? God is saying, listen, I'm still the God of Abraham. I'm still the God of Jacob, and I'm still the God of Isaac. Look at what he began to tell Moses. He said, Moses, I heard what my people saying. I'm not afar off. I haven't forgot about them. I haven't moved away from them or despised them. Look at what he says. 7th verse. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt. Don't you listen? Sometimes if you just know God knows that you're going through something, sometimes that's just enough. God is saying, listen, I've surely seen the affliction of my people. I'm aware of it, and I've heard their prayers. He says, which are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. Did you know that God knows your sorrows? You see, sometimes we could be deceived by our mind because God is not tangible right now. Because he can't speak to us like you and I speak to one another. It's not, we don't necessarily hear him audibly. But understand that God knows the things that bother you. He knows and he's aware of your sorrows. You know, listen, God humbles himself to behold us, but he's aware of us. There's an old song. I don't know if any of y'all know it, but there's an old song that says he's got the whole world in his hands. And understand, with holding the whole world in his hands, he is aware of your current situation. I need to encourage you. I need you to understand that, and I need you to believe it. Look at what he says. Let me finish the 7th verse again. For I know their sorrows. Oh my God. Look, this had to give Moses goosebumps. This should give you goosebumps when I read this 8th verse. And I am come down to deliver them. Listen to that. You know, at some point, God can still come down and deliver you from a situation. As great as he is, the one that says, let there be light, and there was light. He said the one that said that separated the waters from the waters. The one that separated the waters on the earth from the dry land. The one that said, I lift up my hands and live forever, is still the same one that can come down and begin to deliver you from your sorrows. Look at what he says here, 8th verse. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now, therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is coming to me. Listen to what God is saying. You know, sometimes quietness does not always denote absence. Think about that. I'm sorry. I might be a little startled. I might be a little excited, but I want whoever needs this to feel it in their heart. Quietness is not indicative of absence. You know, God has eternity. He's got from the beginning of life all the way to the end of life. We're the ones that's finite. So sometimes we'll get anxious and say, oh man, I only got so much time and I don't want to spend my time in this situation. But as far as it pertains to God, when we pray to him, it's all one eternal now. So when he shows up, he says, I was on time. Why was everybody worried? Look at what he says. 9th verse. Now, therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is coming to me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Now, we already submitted. We have already agreed that Moses is a great man of God. He was a mighty servant of God, did great things. But the only reason that Moses was called was because God heard the cry of his people. Don't let that be lost on you. Please don't let that be lost on you. We'll go through things. The Lord knows that this life is a trial. Just living life can be hard sometimes. And depending on the time period where you live in this life, it could be a little bit harder. But God is still in control. And sometimes what we really get caught up on is timing. You say, Lord, I've been dealing with this health condition for so long. Please, Lord, I just need some alleviation. Can you do something for me? And the Lord is like, I'm absolutely, I'm gonna do it now. For him, it's one eternal now, but for you, you say, oh Lord, I've been in this for 10 years. Can you alleviate? Can you lift up this burden a little bit for me? And he said, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna do it right now. And sometimes, unfortunately, let's go to Daniel, the fifth. I think it's the fifth chapter. Let me show you another example. And said Daniel 6. And did you know sometimes the Lord is working on so many aspects when we're in a situation. Sometimes the Lord will have us go through a situation that he's going to do, and his deliverance is timed with us understanding that he's a deliverer. And what I mean by that is, in our relationship with the Lord, there has to be experiences between us and him, individual experiences that we understand nobody could have done that but God. I'll give you an example. In the book of Judges, if you never read it, it's a good book to read. There's a lot in there, a lot of examples. There is a man by the name of Gideon, and Gideon is going out to fight a battle. And the Lord tells Gideon, he said, there are too many people in this army. And he says, I can't let you go with that many people, because if you win, or when you win, you will say we did it of our own strength. He said, I need you to, everybody that's fearful, unafraid, that has a new bride, that's got different things, he said, tell them to go away. So Gideon makes an announcement. He says, hey, everybody that's scared, go on home. I could see the people that was scared was like, ooh, I'm glad he said that, because I was nervous. And then after he makes that separation, he says, all right, everybody, you still got too many, Gideon. Because if you go and win, you're going to say, it was because we had thus many. He said, take everybody to the brook, everybody that laps water like a dog, that's who you take with you. And there's some types and some shadows and some things that we can extract from lapping water like a dog. But just understand, he said, if they lap water like a dog, you can take them. Everybody else, they got to go. So then when he got to a small number, he said, that's the number I want. Why? Because with this small group, there is no way that you can say we did it of ourselves. When we get it, when we overcome our enemies, we'll have no choice, because we were so small in number, to look to heaven and say, Lord, we thank you for covering us. That's the same thing with some of the things we go through in some of our trials. Because sometimes we can put things into practice and we can try to make moves and we can say, hey, I'm going to call this person, or I'm going to work this out. And we're doing it of our own strength. But if the Lord does it, then we have no choice but to stop and say, Lord, I thank you, because nobody could have done this but you. And what happens? We take that experience, we take that moment, we remember it. And the next time something comes up in our life, we say, oh, I already know he's a deliverer. All I have to do is wait for the deliverance. He's done it time and time again. I just can't get weary. I can't get upset. And trust me, it's hard. Sometimes it's difficult because we're fallible, but that's the process. Okay, I understand. It don't feel good, but I know if I look back over my life, we sang that on Sunday. Oh, they were singing good too. Our band was sounding beautiful. They said, as I look back over my life and I begin to think things over, that's the thing that we have to do sometimes. Look back, think about what happened, and say, I can truly say that I've been blessed. I've got a testimony. What's a testimony? It's something that you can attest to and say, this is sure. There's a verse that said, the Lord has been so very good to me. I think it says his grace has brought me through. I don't know the rest. I usually make up the words. So don't judge me on that. But at the end, it says, I've got a testimony. And that's the important thing. This right here, this book is just full of testimonies of the deliverance and the greatness of God. All right. Daniel 6, look at what he says. Now, here we have an individual that for all intents and purposes was righteous. And did you know that's sometimes what gets us? That's a stumbling block for us. We say, well, if I'm righteous, if I'm doing everything right, there's no reason I should go through this. But did you know that sometimes the Lord allows us to go through things for the sake of the witnesses, for us to be an example to other people so they can see what it truly looks like. And some of us be like, I don't want to do that. I do not want to be an example of goodness for other people. It don't feel good. But sometimes the Lord's like, hey, you're doing so good at following me. I need to use you as an example to show other people, to show my greatness. I laugh because none of us would sign up for that. You say, oh, Lord, what you mean? You see, I got to go through some extra suffering to show other people how great you are? Oh, the Bible is full of that, but he still delivers. And some things are in the Lord's will for us to go through up until a point, and then he delivers. All right, let's look at Daniel, the 6th verse. Here we are, Daniel, righteous individual. I'm gonna try to read. It's a little lengthy. I'm gonna try to read through it really quick, just to give you some context and show you how the Lord delivers and that he still does. 6th verse or 6th chapter. I keep rubbing my nose, got allergies. I'm sorry. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. And over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first. All right, we have Daniel, who is over the 3 presidents that Darius has set over the kingdom. And Daniel is the preferred one. And there's going to be some jealousy. There's always some jealousy when somebody got favored. Look at what he says. Then Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find none occasion nor fault, for so much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. All right, my son would call these individuals haters. Daniel is doing great. Daniel is favored. Daniel trying to serve God the best he can, having a good reputation within and without. And here comes some jealousy, some jealous individuals. And Daniel just trying to live his life according to the dictates of God. And they just mad at no cause. For all intents and purposes, Daniel shouldn't have any problems. He's like, oh, I'm righteous. I'm favored of God. But look at what happens. 5th verse. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against Daniel except we find it against him concerning the law of God. They saying Daniel's so righteous as far as the laws of the land. We're not going to trap him in anything unless it happens to be with the God that he serves, about him violating some law that would violate his standing with God or defile him with God. 6th verse. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captives have consulted together. We came up with this plan, King. I read this. When I read this in my mind, it sounds sneakily. Sneakily, not a word, but it just sounds that way. It sounds serpentine. That's how I hear it in my head. Look what he says. That whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he should be cast into the den of lions. So they're saying, hey, king, listen, we all got together and we all decided it would be a good idea that if anybody asked anything of their God for the next 30 days, we're going to throw them in the lion's den because you are the great God, O king. And the king's like, oh, man, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that does sound good. Look at what he says. 8th verse. Now, O king, establish thy decree and sign the writing that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house. Now, understand, Daniel knew this was the law. And Daniel was like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to still be righteous. There's things that I've consecrated unto God. I understand that it's against what this king is saying, but it's something between me and the Lord. I'm going to still continue. Look what he says. He went into his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he knelt upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed, and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying, making supplication before his God. I could see them just waiting around the corner. Say, oh man, we got Daniel. We got him, y'all. We got him. Look at him praying on his knees, thanking God. Look at him being thankful to God. Who's thankful to God like that? Oh man, we got him. And Daniel's just trying to be righteous, trying to do the best he can to serve God. You know, sometimes if we're not careful, we'll equate, hey, I'm trying to do the best serving God with comfort. And that's not always the case. Look at Jesus. Jesus was the standard of being right with God and went to the cross. Peter, Paul, James, John, Bartholomew, Matthias, Jude, all these men were the standard bearers on being righteous with God and were martyrs. So I don't know where this concept of it's going to be comfortable serving God came from. God does deliver his people, but it doesn't always, it's not always necessary comfort. But look, he gonna deliver his people. Look at what he says. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying, making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? So they went to the king and said, listen, king. They didn't even tell him who it was first, because remember, he loved Daniel. They said, listen, O king, you remember that decree that you signed not too long ago saying, hey, if anybody prayed to another god except you, they got to go into the lion's den? And the king was like, yeah, no, yeah, I remember that. Look what he says, 13th verse. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regarded thee not, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh the petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. So he's trying to make a petition like, oh man, not Daniel. Okay, no, I'm sure there's something we could alter. There's there's got to be a way not to do this. 15th verse, because they were stuck. Sometimes there will be individuals that will persecute you for no reason, but that they are haters. And I hate to use that word, but they're unrighteous. That does not mean that God is not aware of you. That does not mean that God is not conscious of the situation that you're going through. Look at what he says. 15th verse. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is, that no decree nor statute with the king established may be changed. Then the king commanded, they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of the lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver you. Okay, listen. We have to be careful with reading the word of God sometimes, because it is just, look at this. It's just one verse. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him to the den of lions. There is a lot in that. Understand, Daniel was trying to be righteous. Daniel, for all intents and purposes, could have been like, Lord, if you love me, you will not let me go to that den of lions. But it was God's will that he would go to the den of lions, that his mercy and his grace and his greatness would be magnified. But it was not God's will that Daniel would perish. Let that sink in. Sometimes it's God's will that we go through a hard trial, but it is not his will that that trial consume us. And I'll say this again, and I said before. Sometimes I saw a post one time, a quote, and it was somebody, and I say this haphazardly, and I say this tongue in cheek just to make a point. Somebody said, Lord, last year I was on your strong servants list. I don't want to be on that list no more. This year I want to be on the blessed and highly favored list. And that goes to the point of, sometimes the Lord will begin to put a heavy burden on you, because he sees that you are one of his children that he can use to show examples to others. And sometimes we don't necessarily altogether like that, but he knows, much like a parent and a child, he knows how much we can take. And in this situation, I'm going to show you that what Daniel went through was one to show Daniel, I believe, that the Lord could deliver in anything as part of his testimony, but it also showed, it was an example for everybody else. All right, look what he says. 17th verse. And the stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Understand this too. It's easy to read the Bible knowing what happened. Daniel did not know that he was going to survive the lion's den. Daniel went to the lion's den fully prepared for whatever was going to happen, but also trusting in the Lord and believing that if it was the Lord's will, he would deliver him. All right, look at what he says. Drop down to the 20. Okay. I want to keep going. All right. Understand, Daniel didn't die. The Lord closed him out to the lions. The king got up early in the morning, went down, rolled the stone back, said, "Hey, Daniel, are you okay?" Daniel said, "Blessed, O king, my God has delivered." The king then takes the family of those individuals and, and he judges them, right? I want to go down to the 25th verse. Look what he says. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, language that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied unto thee. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. So what happened? That whole situation that Daniel had to go through was for an example to everybody else. It fulfilled the will of God, both in Daniel's life and abroad. Look what he says. The fear of the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom, that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto this end. He delivereth, and he rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So here, even an individual, the king of the Medes and Persians, had to bow down and understand that the God of Daniel, the same God that talked to Moses in the desert of Midian, the same one that said, "I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," that King Darius had to acknowledge, because of what happened to Daniel, that God still delivereth, he rescueth, he worketh signs and wonders both in heaven and in earth. All right. So those are two examples, right? You have, because what happens to us a lot of times is we look at, Lord, I've been in this situation for so long, such a time, and it's painful, Lord, and it's hurtful, and it's tiring. And the Lord says, I know, I understand. I have a time when I'm coming for you. You just, and here's the thing, sometimes we falter. The Lord asks us, he says, you just have to trust me. And that's one of the hardest things for us to do sometimes with the Lord, is to trust him. And sometimes we wonder, we say, why? Why is it so hard for us to trust the Lord? Because we're fallible, because we're working on it. And what happens is, over a period of time, we're forgetful, right? We forget the times when we prayed and the Lord rescued us. We forget the times when we asked the Lord for something and he delivered. We forget the times when we petitioned the Lord and he intervened. And what happens is we get laser focused on the present situation. And we say, "Lord, when are you coming?" He said, we said, "Lord, when are you coming?" He said, "I never left. I never left you. I've always been here." But there's a predetermined amount of time that I need you to go through this. And when that time is accomplished, I will deliver you. All right, let's go to another example. Let's go to John. I think this is another good example, because this is almost an extreme example. But what it does is it lines up with what happened with Daniel. It's an example where Jesus allows something to befall somebody, but not only did he use it to make a point to those closest to him, but the larger audience as a whole, they had to recognize something. And it also affected their heart and pointed their hearts to God. Look at John, the 11th chapter. Got a couple of minutes. As always, if it's your first time here, feel free. If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. But if there are no questions,
I'm just going to leave here today feeling like I did an acceptable job of explaining it and that you have left encouraged. So if there's no questions, then I will feel encouraged through your encouragement. All right. So look at John 11, and I'm going to read a good portion of it. We have a couple of minutes, so hopefully I can extract as much as the Lord would like us to have out of this. All right. So here we are here in John 11. And you know what? I'm not going to give any setup. I'm just going to read John 11 and we'll explain it. John 11. Now, a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So Lazarus and his family and Jesus have a prior relationship. They have a friendly relationship. Jesus loves them. They love him. Third verse. Now, therefore, his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. So what would happen? No cell phones, no emails. We don't have, I often make the joke, no carrier pigeons. They would send an individual to where Jesus was to give a message, and that person would have to come back. So here we have Mary and Martha. They are like, okay, Lazarus is sick. We don't know if he's going to make it. Now, we talking about death. We talking about dying. I can't think of any trial, any situation that is worse than lights out. And here we have Mary and Martha. They know that Jesus has the power. They know that he has the ability to heal Lazarus so that he doesn't die. And they send a messenger. And that messenger comes back. And they're like, what did Jesus say? And he's like, I told him. He said he on his way. You know, we can feel the same way sometimes. We can be sending out prayers like, Lord, hey, it's getting tight, Jesus. I don't know how much longer I can take this situation. I don't know how much more I got in me. And that's not a bad thing. I don't want anybody to leave saying that, feeling that, hey, if I can't just stand in this forever, it's a bad thing. This is a process. We're trying to get to a point to where, you know, we can endure. But if we're honest, like, Lord, listen, Jesus, I'm hurting. I need some help. And sometimes we'll send those prayers out and we'll feel like he's not really responding. Like we want Jesus to be like, oh, Lazarus sick, or, oh, you hurting? All right, let's go there right now. But that's not what happened here. Look at what he says. Fourth verse. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Understand. Martha and Mary don't understand that. Jesus is saying, this sickness is not unto death. That's no different than him talking to us in our trials. You're like, listen, what you're going through is not going to kill you. It's so that I can be glorified. You remember when we talked about in the beginning where, you know, sometimes the Lord will allow something to come upon our life so that we can learn how to depend on him, so that we can learn how to trust in him, so that we can learn and understand and believe that, oh, yes, my God is a deliverer. Because if we never had those, listen, there's a song that it's Through It All. It said, if I never had a problem, I would never know that God could solve them. I would never know what faith in his word could do. That's why I say through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. You know, that's a learned behavior. I've learned to trust in God. I've learned to depend upon his word. All right, look at what he's saying. So Jesus is saying, listen, it's not unto death. It's going to be all right. It's just so I could be glorified. I know what I'm going to do. Fifth verse. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus. Lord, the Lord loves you. He really does. He really does. He loves us so much that he allows, much like a child, he allows us to go through things, and he's coming to deliver us. When he had heard, therefore, sixth verse, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Now, sometimes people, you might read that and be like, man, you didn't really love him if you're just going to hang out in the same place for 2 days after they told you that Lazarus was sick and he was about to die, and Jesus just going to stay there another 2 more days? Look at what he said. Then after that, saith unto his disciples, let us go into Judea again. His disciples saying to him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and thou goest thither again. All right, last time he was in Judea, they tried to kill him. They tried to stone him.
So Jesus is like, all right, we got to go back to Judea. We got to go look after Lazarus. And his disciples, they don't understand. They're like, Lord, they tried to kill us last time. Why are we going back over there? Ninth verse. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of the world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things said he, and after that he said unto them, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may wake him out of his sleep. There's a key in that. I want you to understand. The reason Jesus said that is because Jesus has the power of life and death. So as far as being physically dead, that is no different to Jesus than being sleep, because he has the power to awake you out of that sleep, out of that slumber. He has that power. That's why he said he sleep. Look what he says. Then the disciple said, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. How about Jesus spake of his death? But they thought that he had spoken, taken of rest and sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. Understand this. This is why I want to read this. Mary and Martha had to go through the process of watching their brother die. That is hard. That it doesn't go into that in John. It just talks about, hey, they sent a messenger, Lazarus died. Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. And everybody's like, oh my God, that's what's recorded. But understand that it's not much different than us today. That Martha and Mary, they believed that Jesus had the power and he never came. So for all intents and purposes, they were feeling a certain way, like, Lord, I thought you loved me. I thought you loved Lazarus, but you let him die. That's because they did not know the plan of God. They did not understand that this was all in his plan, and he had a plan to raise Lazarus from the dead, even though Lazarus, listen, if you ask Lazarus, like, listen, I would rather not die so that all these other people could believe in you, Jesus. I would rather you do that some other way. But the Lord allowed Lazarus to die so that his glory could be manifested, so that he could be magnified and shown as an example to everybody else. Now, I understand we don't necessarily want to go through certain things and show forth an example to other people, but I'm sure Lazarus was like, if given a choice, Lazarus was like, hey, I don't want to die so that other people could believe in you, Jesus. But the Lord allowed that to happen. Look at what he says. 17th verse, 18th verse. Now, Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. It's about 12 miles in today's measurements. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Lazarus is dead and they need to be comforted. They're probably having all types of doubts about Jesus and all types of doubts about whether he loved him and all types of doubts on whether he's the one. Like, if you was him, you would have came and you would have healed my brother, Jesus. That is a natural response. That is a perfectly natural response to feel a certain way as we are going through things. And as we continue on, it matures and it becomes less intense. Look what he says. 20th verse. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, here's how we know that she was feeling a certain way. That emotion, that pain was there. She's talking to Jesus, the Christ. Like, this is Jesus, the one we pray to, the one that sent the Holy Ghost, the one that was crucified, died, resurrected, the only begotten of the Father. This shows you it was something that hurt, and she was affected. Then said Martha to Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it to thee. And Jesus is going to go ahead and he's going to explain to her that, listen, Martha, I'm the resurrection and the life. Though a man were dead, if he liveth and believeth in me, he will never die. And he says, though he were dead, yet shall he live again. All right, drop down to the 38th verse. Actually, 33rd verse. Let's start at 33rd verse. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold, how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, and have caused that even this man should not have died? And like you have this crowd of people that are like, man, if he opened the blind eyes, man, he didn't have the power just to heal this man of sickness so he didn't die. Lazarus had to die so that God's glory could be manifest to all these people. Jesus, therefore, again groaning in himself, coming to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take you away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Let me make a point here. The Lord wants his glory. 4 days, maybe a little, not to be graphic, but just the natural process of the body beginning to break down. So nobody could say, oh no, he was just sleeping. No, the body had begun a breaking down process, evident by, hey, he probably stinketh now. He's been dead 4 days. 40th verse. Jesus said unto her, Said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? You know, the same thing is true for us today. You know, sometimes we have to believe that something is going to happen. And I'm not saying that in the sense of, hey, just all you got to do is believe, but I'm using that more as, hey, trust that in God's timing, as long as you continue in his will, things will work out according to his will. And sometimes working out according to his will doesn't look like how we thought it would look. I'm sure Lazarus didn't think being in his will looked like him dying. I'm sure Israel didn't think being in his will looked like them being hard bondage for 430 years. And I'm sure Daniel did not think that being in his will looked like him being in the lion's den. Matter of fact, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I'm sure they did not think being in the will of God looked like them going to the fiery furnace. But you know what they all had in common? Was that at the given appointed time, the God of Israel, Jesus the Christ, showed up and delivered them. You just got to hold on just a little while longer. Look at what he says. 41st verse. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. Remember what I said about sometimes we're an example for others. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I say it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him and let him go.